Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
There was a table set in the kitchen of an ordinary apartment. Everything was just like people. Olivier, duck, and apples, slices, and cake. In the center, in her usual spot, sat the sad birthday girl, Wendy. Today was her round date, 70 years old. Despite her advanced age, the woman looked very well. A neat haircut, lean figure, and she also tried to take care of herself. She had been working as a children's pediatrician for more than 40 years. That is why her profession obliged her to look decent. Opposite to her, in a wheelchair, sat her husband Sam. But there were no guests to be seen. There was oppressive silence in the apartment, but it was broken by an antique cuckoo clock, which beat every hour. The birthday girl was in no mood. She thought at least an old friend would come to congratulate her, but even she was ill with an exacerbation of arthritis. Wendy opened a bottle of wine, poured herself and her husband a drop each, and said, "So Sam, let's have a little one, shall we? I'm a sad birthday. I'm a year older than I am. I can't even look in the mirror without tears, just wrinkles. No cream will do. Since James died, no one wants us, so there's no one to congratulate us. It's just you and me now. Old age sucks, don't it, my darling? It's no fun. You just have to fend off illnesses and live to see the end of your life. You eat, my dear, let me help you. I've been standing at the stove for nothing, haven't I?" The woman began to feed her husband, who had never fully recovered from the stroke, still spoke very poorly and had great difficulty eating. He looked at her with gratitude and squeezed her hand. Later, Wendy helped her husband with his treatments and put him to bed, while she sat down and took a photo album. This is his and Sam's wedding. My God, how many years ago that was. How young and happy they are here. And here she is with Jenna, her best friend, just kids, with youth and such a hard, long life ahead of them. But they are laughing, happy, and unaware of anything yet. She sighed, wiped away a tear, turned the page, and began to look at each picture for the 1000th time, and remember the episodes of life associated with them. The woman had worked as a pediatrician all her life, and her husband was the head of the history department at the university. They met when they were students and were in the same company for a birthday party. In those far-off days, they celebrated together in the common kitchen of the dormitory. Everything was simple: chopped sausage and fish on a newspaper, fried potatoes with onions in a frying pan, and in glasses of port wine and incomparable Soviet lemonade. You can't buy that nowadays at any price in the world. Sam was a joker and the soul of company, singing songs with his guitar and telling funny stories. He at once took the shy and quiet little Wendy. She listened to him with interest and admiration, sang along, and was something like the famous French actress, Marion Mathieu. The guy hung around her the whole evening, gallantly courted her, and even volunteered to see her home. So little by little, they began to meet, and soon modestly married and lived together all their lives for better or worse. They both got along well in their work, since they were both doing what they loved. As time passed, the couple managed to get a separate apartment and did the repairs themselves. In the summertime, they could often afford to relax by the sea and luxuriate on the beach. One thing upset the couple: they could not conceive in any way, and went to the doctors, the more that Wendy had a bunch of friends in the hospital, and to which doctors, and even in desperation a couple of times turned to a fortune teller. Everything was pointless. And meanwhile, the years flew by. The couple was 40, and they gave up hope for a miracle. They thought for a long time about taking the child from the orphanage. The doctor gave all her unspent womanly love to other people's babies. There were always queues to her appointments. Many people knew her, respected her, and loved her very much. Wendy knew how to find a special approach to any child, so he cares so much that the baby does not notice how the examination is over. Of course, the woman always suffered internally from the fact that she could not bear and give birth to Sam Hare. There was some nasty feeling of inferiority, though it is fair to say her husband never reproached her for it. He had his own philosophy on the matter. Why be sad about things we can't change? When Wendy's cycle went completely out of whack, she thought she was going through early menopause, and she was perfectly calm. It wasn't until the baby started moving inside her that she realized the miracle had happened. Sam was as happy as a crystal vase with his wife and forbade her from doing any housework, just in case. And the age for pregnancy was no longer appropriate. Wendy had terrible morning sickness, swelling, and a lot of other complications. But luckily, everything turned out all right, and the woman gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Albeit a little prematurely, they named their son James. The couple couldn't get enough of their beloved son. They bought him only the best expensive clothes. They couldn't take him off their hands, and if he cried a little, they ran to him and comforted him. James had everything. All sorts of toys, fancy imported things, a telephone, a Walkman, and a computer much earlier than his peers. While the boy was little, he grew up to be a wonderful, sweet, and obedient child. He obeyed his parents in everything and loved them very much. They, together with his father, were passionately crafting ships and airplanes, learning how to burn wood and solder, and fixing a bicycle in the garage. The boy was respectful to his parents, never sassed them, never crossed them, and tried not to upset them. But when that awful adolescence came, it was as if the devil had got into the boy. He became prickly, like a hedgehog, and couldn't be approached. He became insolent and rude, and most importantly, he did crazy and totally unpredictable things. Parents were clutching their heads and trying to influence their son in some way, with a carrot and a stick, but it was all in vain. Wendy, as if anticipating bad things, wailed often, "Sam, you can't go on like this. We have to do something. I don't even recognize our son. Maybe we should convince him to see a psychologist. We have one at the hospital. They say it helps a lot of people. I can't get through to him. James just doesn't want to hear us. He starts fighting with the boys and leaves the class without permission. And yesterday I smelled cigarettes on him." But her husband thought his wife was being overdramatic and always tried to reassure her. "Well, don't get yourself all worked up. He's just going through a tough time. You're a doctor, you know that. This nightmare will be over soon, you'll see. James will grow up, settle down, things will get better. All parents go through this." It cost Sam a lot of effort to get my son a state-financed place at a prestigious university, even at the economics department. It would seem that you should be happy to study. But to his parents' dismay, his son was not at all happy about such a prospect. He told them he wanted to be a traveler or a truck driver, not an economist. James could barely make it through 3 courses, and then he was kicked out with a bang for systematic absenteeism. Sam went personally to the dean's office, trying to straighten things out. But there he was told that his son had only been seen at lectures a couple of times during the semester. And the reason is banal. The boy fell head over heels in love with a frivolous person of dissolute behavior and got into all sorts of trouble with her, completely neglecting his studies. A terrible scandal broke out at home. My husband screamed, unable to restrain himself. "James, what are you doing? Why are you ruining your life? You're embarrassing me and my mother. Who do you think you're messing with? I found out there's no place to brand your Emily. Come to your senses. Pull up all your subjects and get back next year, for God's sake. If you don't like it, go to another department, after all. So why drop out? How will you find a worthwhile profession without an education?" My son snapped at me. "I didn't want to study there at all, for your information. It's awfully tedious, listening to all these trends in economics. Doing the math. We can't all be intellectuals like you. And anyway, Emily says that a real man should know how to make money." Wendy was indignant. "Emily again. She's an orphan from Kazan. She's been going around with men since she was 15. Why are you picking on her? You're a smart guy, but now you're talking like a fool. You're not realizing you're ruining your whole life." Scandals became constant in the family, and eventually James left home. He rented a rundown apartment in the suburbs and began living there with Emily, in spite of everyone. James was a very explosive, maximalist, eager to prove to everyone in the world, especially his father and mother, how wrong they had been about him and his fiancée. He was madly in love with the girl. It was like an obsession, like a disease. What can I say? Outwardly, this rip-off was a beauty. legs from the ears, which skillfully used. He was willing to do literally anything for her. Emily twisted him around as she wanted, and he was well aware of that, because the guy was far from stupid. But as soon as she languidly kissed him, pressed against him, and embraced him, he no longer belonged to himself. The guy took a part-time job, but how much did students get paid? And the bride demanded fun and expensive clothes. After all, she had grown up in poverty, so she wanted to luxuriate. The girl kept nagging James. "Don't be like an old grandfather. We only live once. Let's go out tonight, shall we? You only get young once. Otherwise, we'll be like your parents, living on a schedule and saving up for something all the time. You could die of boredom. So come on, keep your nose in the wind and your tail up. Find a proper job, for our sake. You love me, don't you? Prove it." And then James went to work on a rotational basis in the far north. He wanted to earn money for his sweetheart, because all she could get was not enough. She spent it on restaurants and fancy clothes. My son never returned from his earnings. He died, having fallen from a height. The day her parents learned the terrible news, Wendy turned completely gray and literally black with unspeakable grief. After all, her son was the meaning of her life, and she loved him very much, despite all his tricks and sometimes unbearable behavior. Sam took a long time to sue the company, and he found out that there had been absolutely no observance of safety rules, and he even received the penny compensation. But what was the use? There was no getting his son back. When that obnoxious girl had the nerve to show up at James's funeral, even though she was drunk and wearing a defiantly short dress, Sam went ballistic and fist-bumped her. He yelled at her, "Get out of here, you viper. You're the one who led James astray. You're the one who drove him to that damn job. You ruined his life. I can't bear to see you. Where did you get your hands on his poor head?" The girl quickly retreated, out of harm's way, but my husband, right there in the cemetery, began to feel ill. They called an ambulance and took him to the intensive care unit. He had a stroke from which he never really recovered. Wendy herself did not know how she could survive it all. The death of her son, her husband's illness, all came at once. She was literally torn between work and taking care of her husband. It seemed that some kind of curse hung like a black cloud over their family and the troubles would never end. She had the support of her friend, Jenna, during this difficult time. She was the one who was always there for her. She helped both financially and morally, and little by little the woman made it through. Sometimes she would just come over, take a bottle of homemade wine with her. They would drink in silence, and then Jenna would say to her, "Now cry. Yes, yes, you want to, scream, sing, you're at your limit, I can tell." And Wendy cried, roaring like a beluga on her faithful friend's shoulder, and she did feel a little better. Now she gave all her time to her work, continuing to work even as she retired. Little Patience, so helpless, gave her the inner drive. She literally came to life, and was very happy when she was able to help the baby to win the disease and become healthy again. The woman was able to save money and buy her husband maneuverable modern stroller, installed at his own expense ramp in the entrance. After all, walks were the only outlet for her husband, and at least some variety in life of the disabled. Sam was most happy when on weekends, Wendy took him to the park, to a small pond. He could watch the snow-white swans swimming and the gray ducks splashing for hours, and that distracted him from his troubled thoughts for a while. The woman loved her husband very much, so despite his illness, she often repeated to herself, "Thank you for being alive." After all, they were such soulmates that she simply could not imagine life without Sam. Meanwhile, she flipped through the last page of the family album, closed it, and sighed heavily. The clock tolled 10 times, and she didn't want to sleep at all. And she decided to check the answering machine on the phone and erased everything unnecessary from it. She never got around to it. She habitually erased unnecessary entries one by one. "Hello, we are not at home. Leave a message after the beep," followed by either silence, or it was the post office or social service employees, or concerned mothers asking for a doctor's consultation. Suddenly, a thin child's voice sounded. "Hello, Grandma. It's me, your granddaughter, Betty. Mom left me your phone number. She died, and I'm in an orphanage. It's near the city library. It's very bad here. I get hurt. Grandma, sweetheart, take me away from here as soon as possible." The woman went into a stupor and listened to the recording at least 5 times before she realized that it was not a joke, but that the message was addressed to her. What the hell was that? How did they have a granddaughter when their son had been dead for 10 years? And he had no wife or children. And yet the child's voice was very anxious and sad, not at all like the intonation of a child saying it for fun. Wendy woke up, listened to the tape again more carefully, and paced back and forth across the room. Her husband was asleep, and she didn't want to wake him. Then the woman couldn't resist calling her friend. She needed someone to talk to. The woman asked excitedly, "Jenna, good evening. Honey, are you still up? I'm sorry to bother you so late, but here's the thing." And Wendy began to tell me, confusedly, what she had heard on the answering machine. The friend was shocked, to say the least. "I don't know, Wendy. It doesn't sound like a stupid joke. And who would joke like that? Maybe the kid just got the wrong number, though, and the message isn't addressed to you at all. Still, you need to go to the orphanage and at least find out if there is a girl with that name. If there is, then try to talk to her. And if not, you just erase the record and forget all about it. I've known you for years. You won't rest until you find out what's what." In the morning, Wendy gave the tape to Sam, who was thinking hard. He was counting and figuring things out in his mind. Then he asked, "How old is the child? You don't know." Wendy shifted her shoulders. "Who knows?" She didn't say. "Why?" The man answered excitedly. "What if it really is our granddaughter? Well, James lived with this Emily, didn't he? You never know." Wendy only waved her hand in annoyance. "You can say that too. That girl's been bunking with a lot of people. That baby, even if it does exist, could be anybody's, not just James's. But you know I'm still going to go and see for myself today. And the little girl's voice sounds really scared and worried. I'll get a neighbor to keep an eye on you. Okay." Sam nodded in agreement, and Wendy began to get ready to go. She had no trouble finding the right orphanage. The gray, gloomy, uncomfortable building was already depressing and unsettling. The woman was indignant as she walked past the dull, dirt-brown playground, long unrepaired. She thought to herself, "It's hard enough for the kids here, so how hard can it be to brighten up their existence and clean up the grounds? It's like a hospital, after all. If a child sees bright, colorful pictures of animals and can touch the toys, he's not so scared, and he calms down and stops being afraid." Wendy had been talking to the supervisor, a nasty lady, for an hour, trying to talk her into letting him see Betty. She was adamant at first. "I assure you that Betty has nothing to do with you. Her mother died and her stepfather was a drunk and abusive child, so they took her to an orphanage. And what she told you is nothing more than a child's fantasy. So don't get her all worked up for nothing. Why give the child false hope, especially since you are not officially related to her?" Wendy insisted on her own. "What do you have to do? I'll just talk to the girl for a while, and then I'll go right away. Let me, I'm begging you." In the end, the pensioner could not stand it and slipped the manager some money from her purse. She only kept it for her own journey home. She immediately changed her tone and softened. She told her to bring Betty to the playroom. When Wendy saw the girl, she gasped. Everything became clear to her. The child was identical to her dead son, like 2 peas in a pod. He had the same crooked nose, the same crooked stare, even the same blonde, slightly curly hair, just like James. He had the same figure, tall and angular. Wendy started the conversation first. "Hello, Betty. My name is Wendy. I listened to your voicemail message and decided to come see you. Tell me everything. Who are your parents, and why did you think I was your grandmother? How old are you? Because my son died many years ago. Who gave you my phone number?" The girl sighed in a mature way and began to tell the story. "Hello, Wendy. I'm very glad you came. My mother and I used to live together. It was a good time. Even though she sometimes went out at night, she still felt sorry for me and didn't hurt me. My mother's name was Emily. She worked as a janitor. And when I went to school, Anthony came to live with us. He didn't like me right away. He drank a lot, and then he got rowdy, Sometimes my mom drank with my stepdad too, but not much. That nasty Anthony often kicked us out of the house. We spent the night at the train station and waited until he slept it off and calmed down. Even though everyone around us thought my mom was bad, I know for a fact that she loved me. She called me Basinka and told me such interesting bedtime stories. 6 months ago, my mom died. She caught a bad cold and got sick, and there was no treatment. I miss her so much. When she was really sick and couldn't get out of bed, she gave me a piece of paper with her phone number and whispered, "Honey, if you're ever really sick, dial this number. It's your own grandmother. She'll help." After my mom died, I stayed with my stepdad. He was mean, bad, beat me a lot, and kicked me out of the house. So I started begging. I wanted to eat. I was begging near the metro. Neighbors saw me and called child welfare. So they took me here, to the orphanage. But I feel so bad here. The nannies are mean, and the girls make me serve them and hurt me. So I decided that it could not be worse. I chose a moment when the office manager was no one and dialed your number. "Can you help me? Mom could not cheat me, right?" And Betty looked right into Wendy's eyes, and it turned her stomach. Emotionally, she cradled the poor girl in her arms. "I'll try, Betty." "No, that's not right. I'll do what I can and take you from here to Grandpa and me at home. But I'm told by the supervisor that you're going to be adopted. Is that true?" The girl grimaced in annoyance. "Yes, these people came, but I didn't like them." The woman's eyes were cold and empty, like a snow queen from a fairy tale. "I don't want to live with them. And you, Grandma, you have kind, tender eyes. I will wait for you. You will come to see me again, won't you?" Wendy promised the girl she would come, of course, and went home. She was shaking like a fever all the way home, and something unimaginable was going on in her soul. At home, she emotionally recounted everything to Sam. At the end, she added, "Sam, I'm sure Betty is our granddaughter. Everything matches, I counted. Her mother is Emily, her year of birth is the same, and she looks just like our James. We have to get the paperwork together and go write an adoption application. We need to get ahead of the foster family who already wants Betty. The girl says she doesn't want to live with them. But who's going to ask the orphan's opinion?" The man only shook his head. Poor kid. I can imagine what she had to go through with a mother and stepfather like that. I remember that obnoxious whoremonger Emily, what a mother she was. And now she's being bullied at the orphanage. What a childhood that girl had. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. The woman decided to consult with her friend, Jenna, about what to do. After all, one head is good, but two is better. Jenna listened carefully and answered everything. "Let's do this. I'll go with you. The two of us are more confident, and we'll take the recorder with us. We'll turn it on before we talk, just in case." Wendy was surprised. First of all, why do Sam and I have a tape recorder at home? And second of all, what is all this for? I don't get it, do I? My friend even got mad. Well, think about it. If that Molly just wants you to see Betty and get money from you, then everything there has been bought and sold, and no one will give you Betty for nothing. Mark my words, don't you watch any TV at all. Orphans like Betty are a big business industry, and orphans like Betty are a big business. I have a tape recorder. You know I have a son who's a journalist. We have a lot of that stuff at home. I'll ask him how to use it. Because you and I are already at an age when we are not at all familiar with modern technology. That was the deal. In the morning, Wendy took all the necessary documents and went with Jenna to the shelter. As soon as the pensioner voiced her desire for guardianship over Betty, the manager laughed right in her face. She said venomously, "Are you kidding me? Have you looked at your passport lately? Who would let you get custody at that age, and with an invalid husband in your arms? Especially since Betty is about to be adopted by a family. It's already been decided. The custody proceedings are set in motion. So I'm sorry, I can't help you." The pensioner did not give up. "And if I prove that I am Betty's own grandmother, then how? And I'm pretty sure I am. Especially Betty doesn't want to live in that other family. Isn't the child's opinion completely disregarded? Would she be worse off with her own people than with complete strangers? Don't me feel sorry for the girl at all. She's been through so much. The death of her mother, the abuse of her stepfather. Molly continued to clearly sneer, reveling in her power. Darling, you're already at a respectable age, but you're like a child, by God. The other family gave me so much money, not stingy, for the girl, that unequivocally I will decide in their favor. And the opinion of Betty, kinship, who needs it all. She'll get used to living there. Where will she go? And if you want to fight for your granddaughter, prepare the money too. Have I explained everything clearly? Do you understand? Wendy gritted through her teeth. More than that. Keep in mind, I will not give up and leave my granddaughter in trouble. I will fight for her to the end. Have a good day. I'm not saying goodbye. How can you do this? Practically sell children. It's just blasphemous. The headmistress smirked. Am I supposed to live on something? And my children, you have to feed and clothe them. You're such a moralist, aren't you? Who cares about those poor orphans? No one cares about them at all. Let them be glad that I'm putting them up somewhere. I won't keep you any longer. I have a lot to do. The women hurried out of the shelter, Wendy shaking with indignation. See how shameless she is. She is not afraid to openly declare that she takes money, and even extort money from people. Doesn't she think there's anything she can do about it? Jenna patted herself on the pocket. We have everything on tape, and you said, why do we need a tape recorder? Now her words are proof, not nothing. So Wendy suddenly remembered. Listen, I have a good friend of mine. I've been watching and treating her son since he was a kid. I can say I got him back on his feet. We beat his asthma. So they say he's a successful lawyer now. Andrew, I will try to ask them for help. Let them help you do it right. Tell you where to go and what to do. Jenna wondered. That must be a paid service, right? And they don't come cheap these days. I'll help if you need it. I'm sorry about the girl. You're no stranger to me. You should know that. So they did. Andrew agreed to meet with the pediatrician, remembered this beautiful woman who helped him overcome his illness and a lot of complexes. Together, they intelligently drafted a lawsuit to suspend custody and established kinship between the girl and her grandmother. And they filed the lawsuit in court. At the end, the lawyer added, Wendy, I did what I could. But you have to understand that this is not a quick process. It can take a month or two. It may take a month or two for the court to order a genetic analysis, for the materials to be taken and samples to be compared. All this time, the girl will remain in the orphanage. There's nothing you can do about it. But that other family won't be able to adopt her either. I'll see if I can get you a free pass to see Betty. If you like. The woman was moved to tears and reached into her bag for her purse. Andrew, thank you so much. I couldn't have done it without you. Betty is my granddaughter. I can feel it. And she looks just like my dead son. How much do I owe you for everything? Here you go. This is everything my friend and I put together. The man frowned and waved his hands. Come on, Wendy, stop it, or I'll take offense at you. I won't take any money from you. How much you've looked after me, you've treated me, you've set me on my feet. My mother told me you didn't take a penny. I remember the good things. There are only a handful of good specialists like you in our city. So thank you for your hard work. Good luck. If you have any more problems, do not hesitate to contact me. I will definitely help. While the proceedings were going on, Wendy was allowed to see Betty, and now the happy woman came to see her every weekend. She brought her granddaughter fruit and sweets, and they talked a lot. Betty was very happy to see her beloved grandmother and literally glowed, chirping incessantly. Life in that awful orphanage did not seem so gray and hopeless to her anymore. She lived from weekend to weekend, counting the minutes until the meeting. Wendy wondered. Betty had grown up in such difficult conditions, in a dysfunctional family, and clearly no one was taking care of her. At the same time, the girl was very smart and clever. She loved to read. The pediatrician had a good library at home, many children's books, which James still read, and she regularly brought them to her granddaughter. The two of them felt so good together, soulmates reaching out to each other. Wendy was anxiously awaiting the results of the genetic test, because she knew that that was when everything would be solved, and Betty would finally be given to her. There was no doubt in her mind that she was her own. She felt it with every fiber of her being. So the examination was a mere formality, nothing more. When our heroine was summoned to the board of trustees, She flew there like on wings, already dreaming of bringing Betty home, introducing him to Sam, and they would live as one family. But when she was shown the results of the examination, and she read them, the woman was simply shocked and tears welled up from her eyes, against her will. It said in black and white that they were strangers. No kinship, 0%. The headmistress smirked sarcastically and maliciously, and did not hide her joy. "Why have you been messing with our heads for so long, my dear? Are you happy now? Have you got justice? I told you this would happen, didn't I? You didn't want to be nice, did you? You didn't go along with my terms? You can blame yourself now. Goodbye." Wendy called Jenna and burst into tears. "Jenna, I'm going to die. The examination showed that Betty was someone else's. But I can't believe it. I feel it's not true. That's it, it's over. Now I'll never get the girl back. And I was so fond of her. I'm so fond of her. What am I going to do? Watch a child being given away to strangers? She will suffer. Betty hopes she won't have to put up with it for long and we'll be living together soon. Have I deceived her? Betrayed her? Why is everything so unfair?" A friend immediately came to her, began to comfort her. "So, honey, don't get sour. We found our way out of deadlocks like this before. Pull yourself together, drink some valacordine, and go to war. Call Andrew again immediately. Maybe he'll give you some good advice. My gut tells me there's something wrong here too." In the lawyer's office, Wendy couldn't help herself again and burst into bitter tears. Then she handed him a picture of her late son James and a picture of Betty, the two of them having recently decided to take a picture of themselves. She wailed, "Look for yourself, Andrew, how similar they are. You don't need any expertise. I feel that Betty is no stranger to me, you know. And the timing is the same. And her mother is the same woman James lived with before he died. I don't understand how it could be negative. What am I supposed to do? Let my hands fall and watch my granddaughter be taken by strangers. And she will suffer again without affection or love. What is all this for the poor child, tell me? And last time I forgot to give you the tape recorder. Here, listen. That's what the manager told me the first time we met. And now she happily added that since I did not go on her terms, then now the girl and will not see." The lawyer listened carefully to the tape and jumped up in his chair. "Wendy, why didn't you show me this before? That changes everything, doesn't it? It all makes sense to me now. All right, my opinion is this. Now we'll make an application for re-examination in an independent laboratory. We have the right. We need to attract to your story the press and preferably television, internet resources. Then the whole bunch of corrupt exactly do not be unlucky. They will not be able to get out. Brace yourself, you'll get a lot of nerves, but there is a good chance to come out victorious. I'm telling you as a lawyer." Jenna supported Andrew. "That's right. I have a son who is a journalist for the local newspaper. I'll ask him to help. You have to start somewhere. Why didn't I think of that in the first place? Oh, Andrew, what a head." Wendy wiped away her tears and smiled. "Guys, honey, thank you for everything. I never would have thought of anything like this myself. Maybe I could really get the supervisor to come clean. And really, I could take Betty material for myself to any other lab. How could I have believed them so blindly and fallen in love? A second genetic examination by an independent laboratory showed a completely different result. The relationship was 99 9/10% proven, because it couldn't happen otherwise. Thomas, Jenna's son, negotiated with local television, and Wendy, along with Betty, the manager of the shelter Molly, and lawyer Andrew were invited to participate in the program Law and Order. It was a pay case, so the greedy woman agreed easily, because she thought she had all the trumps in her hands. And this way she would become famous and earn some money. She had no idea about the existence of another expertise and the real, true result. And she wanted to make it sound as if the half-crazy old woman had worn out all the good people's nerves and wanted to take the girl she didn't even know. Molly even made a fiery speech about how she loved poor orphans and put them in good families. Action, action. The show was on. First, the host gave a little background on Wendy's life and Betty's complicated fate, and then he got to the heart of the matter. Lawyer Andrew was given the floor. The competent lawyer so skillfully and legally explained everything, provided all the evidence, and left no stone unturned from the opponents. The result of the re-examination, Read Lev on air, had a blast effect. All Molly's conceitedness and arrogance immediately evaporated. All the words were confused. She only blinked, blushed, and tried to justify herself weakly. Like, "I'm so sorry, there's just been a misunderstanding." The anchor ended the program on an optimistic note and wished Wendy to be reunited with her granddaughter. The channel's ratings were off the charts. Ordinary citizens were outraged and indignant. How is it possible to have such arbitrariness in the workplace? Is it conceivable to brazenly abuse and extort money from an honored doctor and deliberately separate a native grandmother from her orphaned granddaughter, no matter how hard she tried to wiggle and twist, and pretend that there had been an unfortunate misunderstanding? But it was too late. The flywheel of popular anger had been set in motion. Audits and inspections were conducted at the orphanage and the lab. A scheme to defraud ordinary people that had been in place for years was exposed. Molly, in collusion with the head of the lab, had repeatedly tricked such tricks, and when a person is cornered by just such a false conclusion of examination, then agreed to any amount to get his. The profits from the sale of children clever women shared equally. Now they faced severe punishment for such serious crimes, and there was no chance of getting away with it. Now Wendy quietly filed all the appropriate paperwork to adopt Betty, and a month later, without any hassle or delay, she was finally given her own granddaughter. The grandmother was leading her own dear child by the hand, carrying her shabby bag of belongings, taking the child away from that awful place forever. For Betty, it was the happiest day of her life. She was smiling, sunny-cheeked, and just glad that she wouldn't have to spend another day in the orphanage. When they entered the apartment, an excited Sam was already greeting them on the threshold. He had put on his suit and shirt for the occasion, so he was going to meet his own granddaughter. The girl boldly approached the man and held out her warm little hand to him. "Hello, Grandpa. I'm Betty, your granddaughter. My grandmother told me a lot about you. Do you really have the most authentic coin collection? Will you show me? There must be some really, really old ones, right?" The old man's eyes moistened as he looked at Betty, and he thought he saw little James before him, so strong was the resemblance. He winked at her and said cheerfully, "Well, granddaughter, then let's go to my office. I have a lot of interesting things in there. There's even a ship's helm and a captain's cap." Wendy had already set the table and went to call the family for dinner. Quietly, she peeked into her husband's office. The picture was a heartwarming one. Betty was sitting on her grandfather's lap, and they were practicing a counting song together, both laughing and squealing. She hadn't seen her husband this happy in a long time, probably not since James had died. At lunch, the girl gorged herself on soup and cakes and praised her grandmother's masterpieces, then volunteered to help clean and wash the dishes. The woman was very pleased, for no one had cared for her in such a long time. The granddaughter has turned the old people's lives upside down in a good way. It had a special effect on Sam. Since he and his granddaughter were drawing, writing, and talking all the time, his movements and motor skills improved noticeably, his memory and quickness of reaction improved, and there was a thirst for life in his eyes. And how else could it be? You have to live and put your granddaughter on her feet. And soon their friendly family had another lodger. One evening, Wendy came home from counseling. There was an unaccustomed and tense silence in the apartment. Betty was concentrating on her homework. Sam was pretending to watch a television program. In the bathroom, the schoolgirl's new imported tights were hanging on the radiator, washed and ineptly darned by a child's hand. Looking closely, the woman noticed that her granddaughter's knee was knocked down and thoroughly covered with green. Grandma asked sternly, "So, my dears, what happened?" "Betty, I just bought you those tights the day before yesterday. Where did you manage to tear them like that? Did you fall or something? Come on, don't be so obscure. Tell me everything in order." The girl looked frightened at the woman and gibbered. "Bah, this is what happened. Don't swear, okay? So I'm coming home from school, and I see the mean boys in the yard, Alex and Ben, torturing the little cat. They tied a tin can to his tail and made fun of him. And the poor thing is crying, it hurts. I couldn't stand it and took the kitten away from them. And he climbed up the tree out of fear, so I went after him. Barely got him out. Here, the tights, and ripped. I got caught on a limb and scratched my leg a little. Wendy was shocked. How did you fight back? Did you fight with the boys? Like up a tree? You could have fallen and broken something. Betty, you're a girl after all. The granddaughter was blinking her eyes. I couldn't leave a defenseless animal in the lurch. They would have tortured it to death. And I didn't hit them at all. Just hit them a couple of times with a briefcase to scare them. And that was it. So I named the kitten Snowy. He's so cute and funny, you'll love him. Grandpa, however, was afraid that you might swear, because you don't really welcome animals in the apartment. The pensioner anxiously interrogated. My dear girl, don't you want to tell me that the animal is already in our house? But the child didn't have time to respond. A snow-white kitten rolled out of her room. It looked around, saw Wendy, rubbed its ear affectionately on her leg, and jumped into Sam's arms. He smiled benignly and stroked his fur and pink belly and smiled. Snowy immediately rumbled and closed his eyes in pleasure. A contented girl brought a string and a candy wrapper tied to it and solemnly announced, Snowy the cat's coming out. Grandma, look how he can do it. You're going to die laughing. Grandpa and I laughed so hard. Snowy, come here. Come on, catch the rope. The kitten really started bouncing up and down on her hind legs and trying to catch the wrapper so funny that Wendy couldn't stand it and actually laughed. She hugged her granddaughter, kissed her on the top of her head and said affectionately, What are we going to do with you? All right, let him stay. But you have to take care of him. Take out the litter box. Feed him yourself. All right? Oh, she's a slay little fox growing up, just like her father. Grandpa's right. I've always been against animals in the apartment, and now I've let him down in his old age. Betty jumped for joy and kissed Granny back. She gibbered, Here, Grandpa, and you didn't believe that I could talk Grandma into a kitten. She's the best. Sam had been asleep for some time, and Wendy was dozing off, watching a girl's show half-eyed, about to go to bed, when suddenly Betty walked quietly into the room. She was in her pajamas and snuck under the covers. She was surprised and instantly woke up. My sweetie, why are you still up? You have to get up early for school tomorrow, don't you? Or are you in pain? The girl answered quietly. You told me today, Grandma, that I'm just like my father, just as silly. And now I keep thinking about it. I can't sleep. Tell me about Daddy. What was he like? I don't know him at all. Why didn't he live with us? The woman got up, quietly took the album from the mezzanine, and sat down again next to her granddaughter. She leafed through the pages and talked. Look, it's James, 1-year-old. He was so chubby, like a doll, and funny. And this is your daddy's 6 years old. We bought him a new briefcase and took his picture. See how important he is. Your father studied very well. You are so clever like him. They praised him at school. I even have his report card. I'll show it to you tomorrow. And this is your daddy, a grown man, with his friends from university. Look how much you look like him. The look, the eyebrows, the hair, the shape of your face. Really? Betty asked impatiently. And then what happened then? Why is there no picture of my mother? Didn't he love her at all? And why didn't he ever come to us? The woman sighed heavily and wondered frantically what to tell her granddaughter. The dirty and unsightly truth that her absent-minded and promiscuous mother had ruined her son's life. But the child wouldn't understand that. Her mother was still the best to her, no matter what she really was. Wendy answered, carefully choosing and weighing each word. And then your dad met and fell very much in love with your mom, and they started living together, apart from your grandfather and me. That's why there's no more pictures. I'm sorry, buddy. He decided to make a lot of money, so he went far away. But an unfortunate thing happened. Your father died on the job. Your mother grieved for him, and then she found out she was expecting a baby. That's how you were born. But your grandfather, and I didn't know anything about you. Your mother didn't tell. Why, I really don't know. But I'm sure she loved you very much too. How could anyone not love a smart girl like you? If you want, this weekend we'll go visit Daddy's grave and your mom's. We'll clean it up. Bring them some flowers." The girl huddled closer to Wendy and whispered sleepily, "Thank you for telling me, Grandma. It all makes sense to me now. I knew that my parents were very good." Wendy's heart clenched at these words, and she stroked the girl's unruly curls and said, "That's it, little bunny, now it's time to go to sleep. Come on, I'll tuck you in and tuck you in." The little girl instantly fell asleep serenely, and Wendy admired her and swallowed her tears, thinking to herself, "Oh, my son James, why did you leave this life so soon? You never got to see your little girl, and she is such a clever girl, just like you. I'm sorry, son. If I'd known it would turn out like this, I wouldn't have forbidden Emily to meet. Then maybe he wouldn't have gone to that damn job, and life would have been different. You know I'm not leaving Betty. We'll raise her well with Sam. She's my light in the window now, my happiness." The woman wiped away a tear, put out the night light in the nursery, and went to rest, too. She did the right thing. There was no need for the girl to know what her mother was really like. It was unnecessary. Let her live with the idea that her parents loved her dearly and were good people. Over the weekend, Wendy and her granddaughter visited her father's grave. There was a nice, solid monument with his picture on it, and 2 snow-white birch trees growing beside it. When they arrived at Emily's grave, the sight was dismal. The grave was overgrown up to the waist, with a faintly visible plaque with the name and date of birth and death. The girl couldn't stand it and cried, "Grandma, I dream about my mother a lot. I still miss her. Why don't we clean up in here? I want my mom's place to be just as neat and clean." They zealously took up the cause and put things in order. A week later, Wendy ordered a modest memorial, except the woman certainly didn't have a picture. So she asked her granddaughter, "Betty, do you have a picture of Mom by any chance to put on a monument for us?" The girl thought about it and answered, "I don't have one, but I know where it is. At my stepfather's house. My mom's album was always in the closet there, but I won't go to him alone. I'm afraid of him. He's mean." Wendy replied, "You don't have to. I wouldn't let you go there, of course. I'll go myself tomorrow. Just give me the address where you used to live, okay?" The very next day, Wendy and her combative friend, Jenna, went to Olia's stepfather's house to ask him for a picture of the woman. Jenna was itching all the way. "Wendy, you're such a jerk. One minute you hated Emily and were ready to rip her hair out, and now you're trying to get her a statue. Why would you do that? I honestly don't understand." The woman sighed and replied, "I'm only doing this for Betty. She wants her mother's grave to be as good as her father's. It's understandable for a child. Her mom is the best to her, no matter how you spin it. This trip to the boozer is crazy. Of course, you're right. Where else would you get a picture of Emily?" When they arrived at the address, they were surprised. The old shabby house looked uninhabited and neglected. Even the windows were boarded up crosswise, and the rusty lock made it obvious that no one had lived there in a long time. Jenna decided to ask the neighbors what was going on. An elderly woman of their age came out on the porch and introduced herself. "Hello, my name is Camille. Are you looking for me? Do I know you? I don't remember." Wendy began to explain confusedly, "Good afternoon. Here's the thing. Where's your neighbor, Anthony? Doesn't he live here? I'm raising a girl, Betty. She's my granddaughter. Used to live here with her mother, Emily. Anyway, we decided to put a monument on her mother's grave, but we can't find a picture anywhere. So I thought, maybe Anthony can give us a picture. Surely there must be some at home somewhere." Camille just waved her hand. "He's not alive anymore. It's too late. That evil son of a bitch burned himself 3 months ago, drunkenly fell asleep, and didn't open the damper in the furnace. He died that way. We had to bury him ourselves. The whole street contributed a kopeck each. He had no relatives, and the drunkard's friends disappeared in a moment. Our agony was also over, otherwise we were tired of calling the police and the district police. What a troublemaker he was, a horrible man. Though it's not customary to remember the dead badly, there's nothing good to say. If you want, go through, look, maybe you will find some pictures. After the funeral, my husband and I locked the house ourselves, so that looters wouldn't wander around, and the windows were boarded up. I'll take the key out now. But I warn you, it's such a mess. Anthony never cleaned it. He just drank and took his friends around. A neighbor gave Wendy a key, and she and her friend entered Betty's stepfather's house. They turned on the lights and gasped. The women had certainly never seen such a pigsty. Everything was a mess, the bed filthy and crumpled, empty bottles, and dried-up leftovers everywhere. Wendy was horrified. God, poor Betty. What terrible conditions she had to live in. It was unimaginable. She asked me to take her backpack and her bunny, but where could she find it? In this mess, I think the album was in the closet, on the top shelf. That's what my granddaughter said. But that was a long time ago. Emily's been gone a long time. Maybe that Herod threw it all away. Jenna was uncomfortable being here, and she yanked her friend away. Wendy, pull yourself together. Let's find a picture and get out of here. Otherwise, you might get some other disease. I'm getting all itchy with nerves. The pensioner opened her closet, rummaged through the top shelf, and indeed found an album. There was no time to look at it, so she decided to take it all home. There, at the very bottom, was Wendy's crumpled Betty's backpack, the one with the bunny she was talking about. The woman grabbed it too. They left with it, giving the key to a neighbor. At home, her granddaughter and Sam greeted her anxiously. The little girl threw herself around her neck. Grandma, I was very worried. You were gone a long time. I know that stepfather, he's capable of anything when he's drunk. Well, did he give you the picture? The woman smiled and didn't mention his death either, just answered. Here, I gave you the whole album, and your backpack, with the bunny, like you asked for. The girl was so happy, she jumped up and down. Thank you. My mom bought it for me when I was in kindergarten. I never parted with it. And when they took me to the orphanage, I didn't take it, I forgot, and it stayed at my stepfather's house. It's a memento of my mom, so let it stay in my room, okay? Wendy nodded her head and answered. I don't mind, but can I wash it? Because it's dusty and dirty. The little girl nodded her head in agreement. Wendy decided to look through all the little pockets before washing, and there were quite a few so as not to ruin the machine. Suddenly, she felt something heavy in the farthest inside pocket. She reached into it with her hand and pulled out a package. She began to unfold it mechanically, and she gasped. There was a gold chain with a pendant, and on it was written, I love you more than life. Yours, James, and a large wad of money rolled up into a 2. The woman also noticed a note folded many times over. In beautiful handwriting it read, My daughter, this pendant was a birthday present from your father. He made it for me to order. I'm dying, I do not need it, and I want it to fall into your hands, not my stepfather. The money is yours, too. Never mind how I got it. Don't ask. Just know that I love your father very much, as it turns out. I just realized it too late. Forgive your bad mother, Kitten, and know that you are my happiness, my sunshine, and my dearest person. Goodbye. I hope you, as before, will not part with your favorite backpack, and sooner or later find it. Tears were streaming down Wendy's cheeks, and she was literally sobbing profusely. Turns out Emily wasn't such a hardened bitch, and truly loved James and Betty. She'd just gotten confused, gone down a crooked path in the first place, and she couldn't stop. The woman exhaled, washed her face, and called out to Betty in a calm tone. She gave her the pendant and all the money and the note. That was fair, and she said, I found this in the pocket of your backpack. Read it for yourself. Your mother wrote it. She wants you to wear it as a memento of her and Daddy. The money is yours, too. You decide where to spend it. It's a lot of money. The girl read the note, and tears beaded down her cheeks. She reread it over and over again, especially the phrase, I love you, my darling. Betty now felt as if she were communicating with her own mother, for this was her farewell letter. She looked at the pendant for a long time, then asked Wendy, Grandma, put it on and zip it up for me, please. Now Daddy and Mommy will be right here by my heart. Really? Let's use the money my mom left me to order a monument for her, shall we? It's important to me. And all together we'll choose the best picture from the album. Sam, Wendy, and Betty sat at the table and looked at the pictures. They had no idea how many pictures of James there were. He was everywhere in the pictures, next to Emily, and his face was so happy. The girl wondered, That's my dad. I've seen these pictures of my mom's youth 100 times, and I didn't know it was him. They chose the most beautiful picture of Emily, where she was shown close-up, and Sam said quietly, "Yes, Betty, your daddy loved your mother very much, I can tell you that." The money was just enough to pay for Emily's monument and to fulfill the girl's most cherished dream. All her childhood she had dreamed of seeing the sea someday. Not in pictures, not on TV, but live. She often drew it, and she put her ear to the huge shell that stood on the table in Sam's study. They had once brought it back from the seas. The four of us decided to go together with Jenna, a family friend. Wendy could not cope alone with Sam and her granddaughter on vacation. She, of course, did not refuse. On the contrary, she was happy and joked, as usual, in her usual manner. So what, a rarity? Going to warm your arthritis and smooth out your wrinkles in salt water? The vacation was unforgettable. Betty was just squealing with delight. It was impossible to get her out of the water. She was diving, collecting all kinds of shells and beautiful pebbles, and admiring the beauty of the sea. And Sam looked at the endless blue of the water, listened to the surf, breathed in the spicy sea air, saturated with the aroma of seaweed, and also almost cried from happiness. He kissed his wife's hands and whispered to her, "God, Wendy." When I found myself chained forever to that damn chair, I thought that was it. There's nothing to live for, and you can't even call it living. When my hands don't work and my feet don't walk, and my speech is all mixed up. I've been holding on just for you, can you believe it? How good that Betty called us, that we found our own granddaughter, that everything turned out this way. That little brat brought me back to life. I wanted to get out of bed to see her. I loved cats and jam. And now I probably know all the shorthand in the world. And I certainly didn't hope to see the sea anymore. And now I tell you, I'm happy. And it's true, no exaggeration. And for that, all thanks to you, my dear. You're like my talisman, my muse, my amulet, always there, whatever happens. I love you, my good one, as when I was young, and even more. Wendy kissed her Sam, hugged a tanned, happy Betty, waved to Jenna floating in the distance, and felt absolute happiness too. So be it.